Good morning. Thank you, Pedro. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I'm Kirk Botula, the CEO of the CMMI Institute, and today I'm going to be talking about how capability drives performance. The CMMI Institute, our mission is to make the world work better. I have three key takeaways from our conversation today. I'm going to be making the point that corporate strategy is capability. I'm then going to make the argument that capability drives performance. And then for organizations who are interested in dynamic capability, or what some organizations call agility, I'm going to make the argument that agility requires stability. So in the past year, the CMMI Institute has been very busy. We were pleased to release version 2.0 of the CMMI for development, the CMMI for services, and the CMMI for supplier management. We also released an entirely new cyber maturity platform to help organizations assess and manage their organizational risk and resilience. We undertook a new program with the Food and Drug Administration and the Medical Device Innovation Consortium in the US, which is very innovative for the US government. The CMMI had initially been funded by defense research and in the US, and for many years the defense aerospace industry has supported the program of getting benchmark maturity levels assigned on a 3-year cycle. The medical device industry wanted to focus less on benchmarking their maturity and more on improving their performance as fast as they can, very aggressively. And so they've instituted a program that involves an annual evaluation, just a gap analysis on the organization, an annual gap analysis followed by a 6-month check-in where they report on performance gains to their regulator, and the regulator is allowing organizations that apply to this program to be relieved of regulatory requirements. So they're saying, we will give you regulatory relief if you demonstrate that you're actually committed to continuous improvement, which is a very interesting program. Last year, there were appraisals in over 100 countries, and we had 16% growth in CMMI adoption. And of course, we were very excited about the launch of CMMI version 2.0. So now to speak about the idea that strategy is capability. This community will often focus on software quality, right? And software quality is an important thing. But what people don't understand is that software quality has a direct relationship to corporate strategy. And the thought leaders in competitive strategy in business, like Michael Porter, he argued that strategy, when asked what is strategy, he said it is deliberately choosing a set of different activities to deliver unique value. So it's the behavior of the organization, not the products, markets, or offerings. And George Stock of the Boston Consulting Group made this argument even more strongly. He said, the essence of strategy is not the structure of companies, products, and markets, but the dynamics of its behavior. The building blocks of strategy are not products and markets, but capabilities. The CEO of Procter & Gamble, A.G. Lafley, with Roger Martin, they published a book on strategy called Playing to Win. And they argued you could synthesize 40 years of thinking on business strategy down to 2 basic strategies. They said you have the average competitor, where you see creates value represented in the blue bar, has cost represented in the orange bar, and their margin is the light blue bar, right? A cost leader, strategy 1, is able to deliver the same value with the dark blue bar at a lower cost structure, lower cost being the lower red bar. Consequently, they have higher margin and will eventually dominate the market because delivering the same, entering the same market, they're able to outperform their competitor. Alternately, the differentiator can provide more value at the same cost structure and also achieve more margin. So in business, it's either the cost leader or the differentiator, the Apples of the world or the discount airlines of the world, who are able to put the average competitor at a significant disadvantage. That means that ultimately there are three types of processes or three types of activities in an organization. Number one, differentiating activities. Those activities that are difficult for competitors to imitate that offer unique value. This might be the design practices at Apple. Cost leadership activity. These are the practices that allow an organization to have cost advantages. Say, some of Amazon's sourcing practices and warehousing practices give them a cost advantage that is difficult to imitate. And lastly, just survival activities. These are the things that everyone has to do, and they won't cause the business to succeed, but they have to happen anyway. For example, paying employees. Everyone has to do it. It has to be done reliably, but it's not really going to have an impact on the competitive landscape. This is the former chairman and CEO of Honeywell, David Cote. He was the CEO Magazine CEO of the Year. And he viewed the CMMI, you can see here he says, we view CMMI Maturity Level 5 as an important differentiator, providing us with a competitive advantage that will help us achieve our long-term business objectives. He reported to Wall Street that he viewed the adoption of CMMI across their development centers globally as a way that they were going to deliver more shareholder value than their competitors. So you can see, rightly understood, at the level of corporate strategy and competition, these topics like software quality, engineering discipline that seem mundane are the things that really will move markets and define who succeeds in the marketplace. So now I'm going to make the argument that capability drives performance. This is Rita Gunter McGrath of the Columbia Business School. She conducted a study where she looked at the 5,000 largest companies on the public stock markets. These are over $1 billion in market capitalization. And she wanted to look at the companies that consistently grew top-line revenue and increased net income. She called them the growth outliers. She screened, she thought, well, what would be a good screen? She said, how about companies that could grow top-line revenue 5% every year and increase net income every year? Well, after looking at over a 10-year period at 5,000 companies, guess how many companies increased revenue 5% every year? Out of 5,000? The answer is 10 companies. 10 companies grew their top-line revenue every year over 10 years at 5%. How many also increased their net income every year? Only 5 companies. So looking at these organizations, she said, what is it that differentiates these companies? And what she found was, she said, they're unusually stable as well as highly flexible. She said their changes are evolutionary and their adaptations are rapid. So similarly, these are organizations that have rigorous process discipline, but are constantly adapting it rapidly. They're investing in constantly renewing the way that they work, looking at what the business environment requires. Now, lastly, I'm going to make the argument that agility requires stability. In the software engineering community, when we hear that the CEO wants to do an agile transformation project, we think, oh, That's great. He wants us all to use Scrum. Well, the CEO doesn't know what Scrum is and doesn't care if you use Scrum. In fact, the CEO doesn't care what your software methodologies are. The CEO has mistakenly believed that an agile organization will be a responsive and resilient organization. That's what the CEO thinks. Oh, if I'm agile, a new competitor comes out, I can turn quickly. My company can respond quickly. It has nothing to do with the fact that the engineering teams are queuing their work in scrums and having daily stand-ups. And consequently, they're brokenhearted and disappointed after they have their agile transformation effort, and they find that they cannot turn the entire organization rapidly. They cannot respond quickly to competitive moves. They just have a lovely work queuing system installed in their engineering team. Right? So the CMMI Institute has noted that over 80% of organizations receiving CMMI appraisals are currently using one or more agile method. However, what we see is that many of these organizations are bottlenecked. They're stuck. And I would say the root cause of this is that organizations are treating their software engineering organizations as a subsystem within a larger system. And so they achieve a local optimum rather than optimizing the throughput of their entire system. Many of you may know the book by Ellie Goldratt, The Goal. In The Goal, he tells a story that illustrates this idea. He was in a factory, and he walked up to a work cell where there was a robot. And the fellow running the robot said, this is a new robot. It's increased our productivity 30%. And he said, oh, that's fantastic. Have your revenues increased 30%? I said, well, no. He said, have your costs decreased 30%? I said, well, no. He said, well, how can you say you've increased productivity 30%? He said, well, this robot goes 30% faster than the robot that was here previously. Now, this is a manufacturing environment. Right? So Ellie Goldratt said, so what you're saying is you are accumulating inventory 30% faster. You're increasing your costs at a faster rate than you had been before. Right? And so that's an illustration of how a sub-optimization works within a larger system. Right? And that's oftentimes what's happening with agile teams, because the organization isn't looking upstream or downstream of the engineering team. They're not looking at the constraints, and consequently any benefits that would happen in cycle time aren't being translated to the larger system. In fact, McKinsey Quarterly published an article, Agility, It Rhymes with Stability. And they made a strong argument that for agile capability, you need a stable backbone of structure, governance, and process, as well as dynamic capability. You need the methods that allow you to sense the environment and respond to them, prioritize work, and respond to it quickly. If you don't have either, the organization will just be trapped. If you only have a stable backbone of structure, governance, and process, but no dynamic capability, you'll wind up as a bureaucracy. And if you have the dynamic capability without the discipline, you'll wind up as a startup that may or may not successfully scale. Now, we've seen the impact of applying the CMMI, of bringing that stable backbone into agile organizations. Organizations such as Nationwide, an insurance company, that after adopting CMMI in their agile operation were able to reduce defects from 8 to 1 per release, and moving from 60% to 90% on-time delivery. Capgemini, also in an agile organization that adopted CMMI, reduced their costs 25% and increased speed 25%. Minax improved sprint commitments 30%, and Blue People, which was a small software factory in Mexico, they went from maturity level 3 and then onward to high maturity, to CMMI maturity level 5. And you can see their effort deviation, and this is a complete 100% agile organization. They use Scrum and Kanban. They went from 55% effort deviation. Maturity level 3 brought that down to 20%. And then after maturity level 5, that dropped to 12. Their schedule deviation went from 80% to 15%, and then is currently at maturity level 5, 1%. So that's the sort of impact that bringing discipline to an agile environment can result in. Now, of course, that's the vision that we have. What we're seeking to achieve with CMMI version 2.0 is to create environments, create a stage upon which high performance teams can execute. And consequently, you'll see the focus in CMMI version 2.0 being on improved business performance. We've added to the appraisal, the CMMI appraisal, a performance report. So now performance management and measurement begins at the very earliest at level 2 within the framework and follows all the way through to highest levels of maturity. And a performance report is now a part of the appraisal. Leveraging current best practices, we've transformed the CMMI from being a textbook that is published every so many years to an online knowledge base of best practices so that we can continually update it as the environment changes. Our cyber maturity content is updated every 6 months. We just released in December services and supplier management, and we're working on new content to extend the framework further. As I mentioned, it's been designed to support agile organizations. We have explicit context-specific guidance around agile practices right in the model now. And we've also improved the benchmarking appraisal method, the appraisal method itself. The goal was to increase the reliability of the appraisal while reducing its costs. And what we found is the time to prepare for an appraisal could take some effort of organizations. We found for the organizations that we've piloted the new appraisal method that the preparation time has gone down. It's had between a 30% and 50% reduction for organizations. So it hasn't reduced the time of the appraisal itself, but the preparation time because there's it reduces the amount of content that needs to be prepared for it. That has a material effect. And the model has also been simplified. There's been a 64% reduction in content, or removing redundancy itself in the model. It's been translated into clearer English, which consequently will also make translations much more accessible. And lastly, we've provided adoption guidance to accelerate adoption. And so we believe between the CMMI for development, services, supplier management, the people CMM, the data management maturity model, and the CMMI cyber maturity platform, we really have a platform that can support organizations who are now facing digital transformation. Right? This is the new frontier. You know, and the Portuguese have always provided maps to the rest of the world of what the future will look like. Right? From Vasco da Gama to Henry the Navigator to Magellan, you're always sharing with the rest of the world what their future will look like. And we believe that the CMMI can provide a compass to equip people to moving their organizations forward into digital transformation. We think of the CMMI as an alignment system that allows the organization to focus on its goals and accelerate its performance and ultimately make the world work better. Now, before I conclude, I just want to make one additional note. With all of this effort, as we work to transform organizations, we know that with all these things we achieve, that these are also environments where projects fail and there are defects and organizations go out of business and things are not the way they are supposed to be. Right? And the thing that I love about this community is that it's made up of people who will come together and fix what is broken and fill what is missing. And I believe what we need to do is to make workplaces of love and courage. And you may say to me, Kirk, why are you talking about love at an engineering conference? Well, Thomas Aquinas, he defined love as a commitment of the will to the good of other people. So he didn't say it was how you feel about people. He said, are you committed to their good? So for this reason, Aquinas would say, you can love people you don't even like. If you're committed, so you can love your customers, you can love your employees, you can love your boss, you can love your investors. And that's by committing to their good and doing what's right for them. And with courage, he would say courage was the mean between cowardice on the one hand and recklessness on the other. And I think of courage as the gas pedal that says go when part of you doesn't want to go, right? When you don't want to go, but you know this is what the good requires, that we go forward. And the good news is that he would say these things don't come naturally to anyone, but they're virtues, and virtues are habits, right? They're habituated, and they can anyone just through small acts of love and courage can habituate themselves to doing the right thing when it's hard for the welfare of other people. And so every time you move outside of your comfort zone, every time you do what is difficult for the welfare of your organization, that is a small act of love and courage. And I will sometimes talk to people and they'll say, well, Kirk, that's nice if you're the CEO or if you're the boss. But I'm not in charge. I can't make these decisions. And the thing is, you don't need the title to lead, right? You don't need the title to have an impact on an organization. And I like to quote, did anyone see the movie Braveheart? Do you remember Braveheart with Mel Gibson? There's a great scene in there where William Wallace says to Robert the Bruce, he says, men don't follow titles, they follow courage, right? And so every time you stick your neck out, every time you take a personal risk to help the organization move forward, you're planting you're planting a seed that can ultimately take root and flourish. And so with that, thank you. Thanks to Pedro for the invitation. And that's the end of the presentation.